This is episode 594 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, hope you had a delightful Easter holiday.
Lovely, a little breezy, a little cool.
Yeah?
But it was good.
Or a happy Transgender Day of Visibility, as the Biden administration is celebrating.
Unforced error on their part, but anyway.
So. Well, they don't think so. They doubled down and tripled down on that thing. So on my personal news, my wife became Catholic over the holiday. I mean, officially, she's been studying for that for the better part of a year. And I had the first opportunity, kind of as an odd coda to that. I had the opportunity to attend my first Calvary service at the UNM football stadium.
Oh, yeah, the sunrise. How was that?
A lot of people. It was a very well-attended event, and just good to see so many people, believers of various backgrounds and different groups there at the football stadium. I would say the crowd was at least on par with the typical Lobo football game.
Yeah.
So, that was great to see, and it was nice before the wind kicked up on Easter Sunday. So,
well, and I saw a report where New Mexico or Albuquerque was rated as a good place for Easter for a variety of reasons. So I don't know if you saw that, but I do think that the sunrise service at UNM, while I have not been there, I've had a lot of people over the years tell me they went to that and really liked it.
Yeah, it was an interesting and enjoyable experience, aside from waking up very early in the morning, but that's okay. All right. Well, the first news item out of the chute here, and I'll give credit to Doug Peterson on Twitter, friend of the show, guest of the show, found this story. New Mexico has invested, according to the Business Journal here, the Albuquerque Business Journal, $50 million through the State Investment Council in a California-based climate investment fund. Now, this is one of a couple stories, and it's often the case where there are multiple issues to pull out of a single news story. This one is kind of a three-fer, if you will. First thing is I have this philosophical problem with a lot of people who claim New Mexico is a poor state. Well, the people are poor, but the government is most definitely not. And when you got $50 million to throw around in investments, that is an indicator that you're not exactly poor. Now, this is, just to clarify, money from the state's severance tax permanent fund. This is one of the permanent funds. The other one is the land grant permanent fund. I think this one's the second biggest of the funds, and it escapes me exactly how much money is in this particular fund. This is, of course, oil and gas created and
but
related.
Billions with the B. So
billions with the B, yes. And so the State Investment Council, which has in the past had a serious scandal associated with it, has invested this money. And, I'm first and foremost, just as a capitalist, as opposed to a socialist, socialists, government ownership of the means of production. Right. This is socialism in kind of its most distilled form, in the sense that, a lot of people throw around the term socialism like they throw around the term fascism. Well, this is literally the state of New Mexico putting money into a venture capital fund to become a part owner in some array of businesses or ventures of some kind. I don't know what they're going to do with this climate fund. That's one of many other issues with this. But New Mexico will be a part owner of these businesses to the tune of $50 million. So we'll start with unpacking that aspect of the story, Wally.
Well, first of all, venture funds of any kind, regardless of what they're investing in, are very risky. They can make you a lot of money, but they can lose you a lot of money as well. So I was involved with a California-based energy fund that invested in alternative energy technologies, and this was 25 years ago. And believe me, I know I know about what I'm speaking and to say where things that you think are, oh, how can this miss? How can this lose? End up not succeeding in the marketplace. So that's one factor. And then the other is you're right. It's like, okay, so yeah, these are the state of New Mexico. You know, the state of New Mexico, from a policy point of view, is we're almost like the tag along. California is the big star. It has the entourage, and we try to follow them to see if we can get some of that to rub off. And this is to me at the same level as like the film subsidy. It's like this is what all the cool states do, so we're going to do this. We're going to put our money into that. Whether it's a good idea, whether it'll be effective, that remains to be seen. But I'll make a bet. I'll just say at the end of the day, they'll be lucky to get their money back long term. But again, these sorts of funds can have some huge winners. But the fact that a state is allowed to invest in it shows that maybe they will manage it a little more politically than maybe would be optimal to make a return on investment.
Well, and that kind of takes us conveniently to the stage two of our critique, which is actually kind of two stages within one. Is the fact that yes, this is of course a climate-focused fund out of California's Bay Area. So we'll talk about the fact that it is a climate-focused fund. Now, one of the things that we've seen in recent years, we've talked, we had a guest on several months ago about ESG, and that is environmental, social, global. It is a means of investing, oftentimes institutionally, in ways that are, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Oh, the G is governance, by the way.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So it's all right. I was like,
yeah,
I knew it didn't sound right
governance.
for a minute. Well, it's one of those. It's an acronym.
It could be goofy because
it's falling
it
out
really
of favor
doesn't.
for lots of reasons.
Yeah.
Even among people that are very environmentally focused, ESG is not necessarily proving to be the huge panacea that a lot of people thought it would be for these.
Well, when you give Elon Musk's Tesla high marks until he decides to buy Twitter and make it a free speech platform, and suddenly his ESG scores plummet, it highlights the fact that it's garbage. I'll just keep throwing out G related synonyms, and it's so the fact is that ultimately New Mexico is taking money from the oil and gas industry and dumping it in yet another way, so-called green projects. So this is both the hypocrisy of this kind of thing, because New Mexico makes its bones, makes its economy on the back of the oil and gas industry, and we are also shifting money into this ESG kind of project, which, I hate to say it, but I'm not being unrealistic. And I think your earlier point touched on this. These kinds of so-called green pet projects, like Solyndra during the Obama administration and many, many others, often have a very poor track record. So we're at least philosophically, if the state of New Mexico, socialistic as the entire enterprise is to begin with, if we invested severance tax money into, say, ExxonMobil stock or Chevron, or pick a suite of energy-related companies, I could at least get behind that philosophically. But taking money from the industry that pays for our way of life here, and then shifting it into so-called green energy, I think it's both philosophically problematic, but also unlikely to succeed economically, because those green so-called programs tend to be, you leave it up to these so-called entrepreneurs. They are entrepreneurs philosophically who are able to jump on the latest bandwagon, even if they're not actually going to make a viable product to sell in the marketplace.
Yeah, so the United States, the world, but the United States in particular, has seen fantastic return on investments for certain technologies. But there's been a lot of money wasted too. Do you remember back to the first internet craze? The one that always got me was balls.com. They were going to sell balls at balls.com, basketballs, golf balls, footballs. So it was this was not a porn site. There's nothing untoward about this, but even things that succeed, a lot of money gets invested that does not succeed, and that's one of the beauties of capitalism. The other thing, and help me out if I'm in the weeds on this analogy, just let me know and I'll quit. But it's a little bit like gambling in a way, betting against yourself. Now, like in horse racing, you can always buy the jockey a ticket at a horse race, the owner can,
Mm-hmm.
but it has to be to win. It can't be for somebody else to win. And then we're seeing in now a lot of things with sports betting about, being able to have the ability to uh, change the outcome of a game when it's not to win. And this, to me, I don't know if it's a good analogy, but it just reminds me of the New Mexico's betting against itself, betting against what the state benefits from. Now, you could argue, and I guess somebody might, that we're diversifying because oil and gas is going away. Well, on the one hand, is $50 million a lot of money? On the one hand, it is. I'm not going to say it's not. When you're talking about government waste, fraud, and abuse, it's a huge amount of money. But compared to what's in the permanent funds, it's not that much as well. So it's like, what are you even doing? Hey, how about we invest the money like that in business in New Mexico that can go forward because of our policies, because of our geography, a lot of things. It's pretty tough to grow businesses here, and that's why the economy is not as diversified as it could be. So, a couple of thoughts, on this one. And if I were one of those funds getting that money, I'd be happy that I had somebody with deep pockets like New Mexico getting in the first round. So.
Well, and then the final point to make is, we constantly hear from our venture capitalists and local folks in the business community, and it's a relatively small group of folks, but there are people working on lab transfers and technology coming out of the Sandia and Los Alamos labs to make that marketable and start businesses here. We hear that they are starved for venture capital. Um, I mean, and I think this is in the vein of what the State Investment Council got in trouble for so many moons ago. But if you're going to invest this kind of money, if the expectation of return is not necessarily that high, 50 million bucks goes a long way in New Mexico when it comes to investing in up and coming businesses. Why not keep that money here as opposed to sending it over to California?
Well, $50 million of venture level funding could put New Mexico on the map big time, And guess what? That's the sort of money we spend on the film industry. And do we get a little bit of growth economically here? Yeah, but it's not the sort that can ever be sustained without that film subsidy going forward. Whereas if you invested in some technology companies that actually would stay in New Mexico, that might be changed a little as well. So again, 50 million, it's either a little or a lot, depending on what you're looking at.
All right. Well, I think we've thoroughly analyzed that story. Very questionable and concerning stuff there. Certainly hoping that the kind of ESG concepts does not take hold in New Mexico. There have certainly been concerns raised and issues about the way the state invests money on our behalf, from pension funds to the SIC and others. But having it become a political tool for those pushing a woke left wing agenda. Not interested in that, but we'll follow up on that as the time allows. So another story with multiple layers to it, Wally, but quite honestly, one of the most entertaining stories I think that's ever come across our desks here at the Tipping Point podcast is Diane Denish, the former lieutenant governor of New Mexico under Bill Richardson, somebody who ran for governor against Susana Martinez and lost when Martinez ran for the first time, succeeding Bill Richardson. She recently made some news, KRQE, Channel 13, and kudos to them for not only finding the story, but getting Diane Denish to go on camera because Denish took it upon herself, thanks to a $200,000 capital outlay provision put into the bill this year by none other than Senator Jerry Ortiz Pino. I might add a progressive Democrat, but somebody who I've always found gracious and to be an enjoyable person to interact with, unlike aforementioned lieutenant governor.
Well, and I will second that. Ortiz Pino, I have sat next to he and his wife over the years at events, and he is an extremely pleasant human being. I'll absolutely say that about him. So,
Yeah.
very much a gentleman. So,
Yeah. So Denish was not excited about the prospect of a park, specifically a park that's got kind of a wide open grassy area, including a playground area, with the monkey bars and the slide and the whole 9 yards for kids in the neighborhood. And quite frankly, $200,000 in a capital outlay process. We'll get to this subject momentarily, but that's a lot of money for some playground equipment. But to be, fair, the former lieutenant governor, friends of Michelle Lujan Grisham, the current governor, and made a phone call and was able to get the governor to line item veto that particular capital outlay out of the bill. So very much an abuse of power, very much the highlight or hallmarks, I should say, of kind of a person that's not, kind of on the order of Scrooge to do that and use their political power counter to the wishes of a bunch of neighbors who have children and get that project vetoed. Just a real kind of sneaky, underhanded move by Diane Denish to use her political power and connections to the governor.
Yeah, Paul, when I saw that the meme of the grumpy old man yelling at the kids to get off of his lawn, that's what came to mind for me. And the circumstances in which this was all conducted, it did not come across very well. And then you hit the nail on the head. Is the people in the neighborhood in general were not against it. They were for it. If there was a broad consensus in the neighborhood against it, or, heck, even a 50-50, you could say, well, she was just working on behalf of her neighbors as well. But, she was really going against what it sounds like to me most of the neighbors in the neighborhood wanted.
Yeah. So obviously, this is another story with multiple aspects to it. Another is we've talked fairly extensively recently, including with another Democrat, Senator Bill Tallman, who advocated and has written about reforming the capital outlay process. On one hand, I can say, from the broad perspective of New Mexico taxpayers and other priorities, I think it's fair to argue that maybe this was not the highest priority, highest and best use for a statewide capital outlay project. This is the kind of thing, playground equipment is obviously the purview of the city of Albuquerque, or to an extent the county, not a statewide funding project. and whether $200,000. Again, not an expert on those kinds of playgrounds, but that seems like a significant amount of money that may have been not necessarily necessary for this particular project. And the idea that this is the kind of thing that we have done where one politician can essentially veto a, a piece of capital outlay. I know it's the governor, but it strikes me as not a very functional and healthy system when you have essentially one person, a private citizen, allegedly acting independently and making a phone call using their personal connections with a statewide funding project. It's something that there should be a little more process oriented, a little more insulation from politics, and a little more justification as well for not just this, but all kinds of capital outlay dollars.
Well, as you say, Paul, there are many levels to this. And, one of them is that while $200,000 sounds like a lot of money, to be able to utilize capital outlay like this, you either have to be a government or have a fiscal agent to help you manage the money. And, I know from experience that it just takes, there's a lot of overhead, there's a lot of requirements to spend this money, and it doesn't go as far as, if just say a neighborhood association will buy a plot of land and do some sort of a park. I have a feeling it would be somewhere along the order of half the amount of money or less than going through this process. And the other, and that's just, it costs a lot, but without even touching the little Davis Bacon and the other things, to where just the cost of any capital project in New Mexico, even something like this, can be very high. And I do want to say, Paul, I have a lot of respect for your union workforce in certain construction industries doing huge projects. But, I'm not sure we need a journeyman iron worker to install the swing set, or paid its equivalent for what would happen in projects like this in the city of Albuquerque. So,
Yeah, definitely. Davis Bacon is one of many components of this particular project, and I don't know if Davis Bacon was a factor here, but it's one of the ways in which our costs of construction go up. And I think we can all look at the condition of our roads, bridges, and some of the other things that are done. We have ample funding for this kind of project, but capital projects, but we're not seeing the. We talked about the ROI last week. This is a classic example where the state of New Mexico is putting up a lot of money and not getting much of an ROI, setting aside the political aspects of this particular story. So,
and then one other factor is who's been the governor that's exerted the most strategic control over the capital outlay process during the tenure. In my mind, it's none other than Bill Richardson, because he would carved a lot of that money away from the legislators, or made them go along with, again, what he considered to be strategic investments. And there's a lot less money for the band uniforms and other things that our capital outlay seems to be used for over the years here in the state.
Yeah. So yet another story of many layers. A story that's a little simpler and kind of, the classic, geez, I'm so shocked, says Paul with no, completely unrealistically. The state of California has recently enacted a new law that sets a $20 minimum wage for restaurant chains in the fast food category. That's our old buddy Gavin Newsom, the BFF of Governor Lujan Grisham, at least as governors go. And we are hearing that Pizza Hut, according to news reports like one on Yahoo Finance, that Pizza Hut announced cuts to more than 1,200 delivery jobs in December. Franchises have also discontinued delivery services entirely. And other pizza and fast food restaurants are trying very hard to either automate or they're getting out of some form of the business entirely. And I think this is exactly the kind of policy outcome we expect from a significant increase in the minimum wage. Now, what we've always seen in the past is that you'd get, $1 or $2 or $3 increase, and it would be implemented over time. And the implicit message was we're not going to dump a massive increase in the minimum wage on businesses at one fell swoop, because that'll have negative externalities that'll result in people losing their jobs. But California, I think they finally jumped the shark, so to speak. $20 an hour for fast food employees is too much for the market to bear. And so we are going to see those kinds of decisions being made. Of course, New Mexico's implemented a significant increase in the minimum wage, which we just so happened to do at a time of really rampant inflation and where the workforce participation was not strong enough so that businesses have been fighting for workers throughout New Mexico. And, it's good to see, at least it's bad to see this happen, but it's good to see that economics rules haven't been completely thrown out the window when it comes to the minimum wage. It is absolutely still the case that you can price workers and businesses out of the marketplace, and it looks like California has done that to a great extent.
Yeah, and then Paul, if it got implemented how they were talking, it was like the fast food industry was almost singled out for an additional increase, out of step with the overall minimum wage in the state. Is that still how that went through, as far as you can tell, or was it just part of it? It applies to them and everybody, or do you not know?
Yeah, it's definitely geared towards fast food employees. And the other weird thing was that Panera at one time seemed to have been called out specifically of that law. And that was kind of the big upshot, was that places like Panera, which emphasize baking bread, were not going to be required to fully implement that higher minimum wage. I'm not quite. It looks like that loophole is still in there. But my question is, if you're paying fast food workers $20 an hour, are you going to have Panera employees making only $16 an hour?
Right.
I don't think they're going to be able to find enough workers to work at the Panera. So there's going to be some interesting developments. But yeah, this is just targeted at fast food employees, which maybe with the agriculture in California, they didn't want to make it a baseline because they have so many people coming across the border to work. Whole different issue.
Yes. And these things, and that's a good example is, quote, even carve outs don't necessarily work very well, because, if you can get $20 an hour doing this, there's probably worse minimum wage jobs in California at this point that now will make less than what you would make as a fast food worker. And then, I know it sounds trite, but the real minimum wage is always zero, because if you make the minimum wage too high, you'll either do something different, whether it's automate something, buy something, switch from a labor to a more capital intensive solution, or else have something done in another state or another country and shipped in, depending on what it is. And yeah, we'll see some adjustments to this, by the way. The thing that makes me nervous is that a lot of things that start in California seem to find their way over a couple of states over to the east of California over the coming years. And it'll be interesting to see whether that happens as well. Interesting in a frightening way, but interesting nonetheless.
Well, there's no doubt that New Mexico tends to be a state that follows California in a lot of policy areas. And foibles and failures. Let's hope that that does not come to New Mexico anytime soon. Speaking of policy failure, the county of Santa Fe, unincorporated areas, recently that county decided to ban plastic bags. Evidence from what I think is probably the single best study in New Jersey found that statewide plastic bag ban in the state of New Jersey did result in tripling of the plastic used in the state there as a result, because people were buying those bags and often having to buy multiple bags because they forget the first time, and all the kind of realities that intervene when these well-intended so-called policies get implemented. So Santa Fe County, unincorporated areas, they banned single-use plastic bags and certain polystyrene containers like styrofoam as well, although there is some exemption for bags used for newspaper deliveries or packaging restaurant takeout food with a high liquid content. And I'd love to be a fly on the wall to see what qualifies as high liquid content in a restaurant.
Hopefully, red chili sauce does, Paul, because think about spilling that in your car, soaking through a paper sack or something that you have to use.
Yes. So bad news, but that's just the way it is. I guess folks in Santa Fe County government don't necessarily follow, concern issues that might throw their obvious preferred policy into doubt. They just going to plug forward, ignoring evidence to the contrary, which is something that New Mexico politicians are, I don't want to say good at, but they do very frequently, for sure.
Yeah, no question.
And something that we have more kind of details to come about, Rio Grande Foundation recently received a ruling from a federal judge regarding a 2019 state law aimed at essentially exposing various donors to campaigns. Our organization broadly believes that individuals have a right to privacy, whereas when we're engaged in the political process, it's a different story for candidates or government when they spend their money. But this is a lawsuit relating to the Secretary of State's and the governor's and the legislature's 2019 law to expose people who pay for advertisements about candidates and ballot measures, not even necessarily pro or con on the candidate side, shortly before elections. And they are demanding that people disclose their donors in those cases. So we sued. The wheels of justice do turn, albeit extraordinarily slowly. And so this federal judge has said that she's in agreement with the law, but that's only the first step. I've already talked to our attorneys, and we will be filing a lawsuit or filing an effort to appeal. So we're filing an appeal on that one.
Well, these, as you say, the wheels of justice, they turn, but they do take a while. And so, Paul, on the appeal, is it at that level? Can you appeal the fact? Is there factual and law at the next level of appeal, or is it just the law that can be addressed by the court, or at this point?
I think it's just the judge's opinion in the law.
Yeah.
It was a detailed 40-page long opinion, and we'll have to get more details on that, because I'm not a attorney, and I hope, like I said, I have talked to our attorney, but we'll get them on to talk a little bit more about what arguments we made. And 2019 feels like ancient history at this point, because that's the session before COVID was even a twinkle in the eye. Of course, that was the 60-day session. Even the 2020 session was fully finished and in the books just before COVID got really rolling. So 2019 is quite a ways back, but yeah, we're already going to be filing a lawsuit to appeal that. Let's see. Of course, another wheels of justice turns slowly. Cheryl Williams Stapleton, the former Democrat House Majority Leader, was hit with dozens of federal charges. These include multiple counts of mail fraud, money laundering, bribery, and conspiring to defraud the United States. So these are federal charges because she was in the business of routing money meant for a vocational education at APS to businesses and charities, which she had set up, basically shell businesses and charities to funnel money to herself and I think her brother and a few other folks. So it's been out there for a long time at this point. Stapleton, she is one of those people that I think falls into the Diane Denish, not exactly a likable character, in addition to her own political and philosophical approaches to the issues, and of course, her inherent corruption. So, not somebody who I was particularly surprised to find had engaged in unethical and illegal behavior, and it's gratifying to see, albeit very, very slowly, that this process is indeed kind of moving towards putting her in jail in some way, shape, or form and holding her accountable. So, I don't know, any thoughts on that one, Wally?
Well, the one thing that I've observed over the years is that when the feds bring charges, they tend to win.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't think they can win, they tend to not bring charges. They rely on state court or they just let people go. So, it's one of those. The fact that the feds did bring these charges, albeit taking them a long, long, long time to do so, I think doesn't necessarily speak very well of this certain politician staying out of jail. But I would also, I would be surprised if she does go to jail. But it's one of those, just based on the charges, I think you make a compelling case. But I have a feeling that she's going to be on probation the rest of her life, if I were to bet. If I were a betting man in terms of what the outcome would be from this, but we will have to wait and see, albeit possibly even more years to figure out what's going to happen with this. So,
Yeah, and a few additional details from 2013 to 2021. APS paid her company $3.25 million. Most of that, so this is where the federal government comes in. 2.5 million came from the federal government. So the federal government does have a real beef here and a real role to play. The state does have its own charges against William Stapleton. And then she wrote around 233 checks for her own benefit, totaling about $1.15 million. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. Obviously, it's the balancing act. This is the kind of case that if I were in the business of trying to make New Mexico's legislature a full-time body, paid salaries, that I would use. Of course, the Democrats are the ones who are doing that, and this is Cheryl Williams Stapleton, of course, who is a fellow former Democrat. But the unfortunate reality of New Mexico is it is a small state with a lot of people with a lot of hands and different pies, and it's almost impossible to fully make people not have some conflict there. Cheryl Williams Stapleton had more obvious and bigger conflicts than almost anybody I've ever seen in the legislature, having been in administration at APS and being a very powerful legislator with a hand in the budget process for APS. So she really had all of the keys to the kingdom and had all of the means to manipulate that process in ways that would enrich herself. So hopefully she is, you know, accountable to the highest extent of the law.
Yeah, and then this is a minor thing in the big scheme of things, but man, is this a pet peeve of mine. She also had a building named for her. So and I understand that they're finally going to take the name down from the building there on the fairgrounds. And so we've had a couple of these. So, Senator Aragon, former state senator, had some facilities named for him that was taken away. And that's a good reason in my mind to say that for a building to be named for you or a big facility in New Mexico, it needs to be done posthumously. And if you're not dead when you're named, you can go ahead and submit to be killed and then have it stay. Just joking there, but we do have a assisted suicide law. So if you really wanted to do that, but and the reason I think this ties in is along the point of all the conflicts that are built in. It's like, people currying her political favor or currying other politicians. We're going to name something after her to hopefully get more money out of it. And then when you see that some of the people involved in these are skimming money off, it just makes it that much more unpalatable.
Well, before we conclude, I just saw a report that Jordan Peterson's wife also became Catholic over the weekend. So good for Jordan. Jordan Peterson. If folks don't know who that is, look him up. He's a very interesting and I think worthwhile person to follow on social media, and does some interesting commentaries and whatnot. But with that, we will conclude the program. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.